Nobody remembers the plane that kept showing up. They remember the Spitfire, the Messerschmitt, the B-17, the Legends, the machines that made it into the history books, and the museum displays, and the Hollywood films. But there was another aircraft flying through every major chapter of World War II, one that was already being written off before the war even started. It was slow, it was ugly, it looked like something built in the wrong decade. The Spaniards who first encountered it laughed and called it Big Shoe. Churchill personally ordered it shot down even while it was flying with a red cross painted on its side. And yet, this forgotten biplane laid the mine that knocked one of Britain's most powerful warships out of the war for 3 years. It landed troops inside a major European city by touching down on the river running through it. It was declared obsolete in 1938 and was still flying combat missions in 1943. This is the Heinkel HE-59, and the fact that you've probably never heard of it is exactly the point. The HE-59 didn't start life as a military aircraft. At least, that's what Germany needed everyone to believe. In 1930, Germany was legally bound by the Treaty of Versailles, the post-WWI agreement that stripped the country of its military aviation entirely. No bombers, no fighters, no warplanes of any kind. But Ernst Heinkel was quietly working on something new, a twin-engine biplane for the Reichsmarine, Germany's navy. Officially, it was a civilian cargo hauler, a commercial floatplane for passenger service. 2 prototypes were publicly presented as exactly that, and nobody was meant to look too closely. The design was deliberately conventional. 2 wings stacked on each other, 2 BMW CI V12 engines mounted between them, a boxy fabric-covered fuselage that looked like something from 1920. It wasn't beautiful, it wasn't fast, but it was solid, stable, and cheap to build. In a Germany that was economically strangled and militarily restricted, those qualities mattered more than any performance figure. The first prototype flew in September 1931, not in Germany, but in Lipetsk, Russia, deep inside Soviet territory, deliberately chosen to hide the program from Allied observers. The plane didn't even carry its real name. They called it D-15, a ghost aircraft built by a country that officially couldn't build it. The floatplane version flew in January 1932, and that's the form that went into production. The floats themselves were one quietly brilliant design choice. Their hollow keels doubled as fuel tanks, holding up to 3,200 liters in long-range configuration, giving the aircraft serious reach for its era. By 1938, 166 had been built between Heinkel and Arado. Officially, all of them were already considered outdated, past their prime. The paperwork said replacement was coming. The HE-59 just kept flying anyway. But that was just the beginning, because what came next would show exactly what this forgotten biplane was actually capable of. In 1936, the Spanish Civil War handed Germany a testing ground it couldn't pass up. Franco's nationalist forces were fighting the Republican government. Germany threw its support behind Franco, and with it came a chance to field test secretly developed equipment in real combat. HE-59s were sent to Spain as part of the Condor Legion, officially on coastal reconnaissance duty, stationed in Cadiz, Melilla, and Mallorca. In practice, the crews were doing something far more aggressive. At night, they'd approach Republican harbors with engines throttled back to near silence, gliding in low, releasing their loads, and slipping back into the dark before defenders fully understood what had happened. The Spanish Republicans, watching those enormous clunky pontoons hanging under the fuselage, thought of oversized work boots. They started calling it zapatones, Big Shoe. It wasn't a compliment. But what mattered far more than the nickname was what the German crews were quietly absorbing. How to land a floatplane in an unfamiliar harbor. How to operate without proper support infrastructure. How to maintain the aircraft in field conditions far from home. None of that appeared in any performance specification. None of it made headlines. But it was there, stored in the experience of the men who flew the machine, ready to be used when Europe went to war 3 years later. When the war officially started in September 1939, the HE-59's future looked grim. As a bomber, it was finished too slow, too exposed, too easy a target for any modern fighter. About 80 machines were still in service, and the assumption was they'd be quietly phased out. Nobody briefed the HE-59 on that plan. In the first weeks of the war, while the world watched Germany tear through Poland, HE-59s were doing something quiet and devastatingly effective, laying magnetic mines off the British coast. And then came November 21st, 1939. HMS Belfast was a state-of-the-art Royal Navy cruiser, brand new, commissioned just 3 months earlier in August 1939. 12 6-inch guns in 4 triple turrets, advanced fire control, one of the most capable warships Britain had afloat. That morning, she was leaving the Firth of Forth for a routine gunnery exercise. At 10:58 a.m., she detonated a German magnetic mine. The explosion broke her keel. It wrecked her engine room and a boiler room. 1 man died, 26 others were badly injured. Belfast was towed back to port, and the damage assessments were brutal. There were serious discussions about whether to scrap her entirely. In the end, she was repaired, but it took more than 3 years. HMS Belfast did not return to combat until November 1942. She missed the fall of France. She missed the Battle of Britain. She missed Dunkirk and the entire early war she had been built and commissioned to fight. For a plane that was being written off as useless, the HE-59 had just quietly removed one of Britain's most powerful warships from the board before it ever fired a shot in anger. And what happened next would take that ruthless efficiency somewhere nobody had imagined. May 10th, 1940. Germany launched its assault on the West. France, Belgium, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, all at once. And among everything that happened on that single day, one of the strangest operations of the entire war was unfolding on a river in Rotterdam. The plan: seize the Nieuwe bridges before Dutch engineers could demolish them. The problem: getting troops from nearby Valhaven airfield to the bridges fast enough. German planners looked at the timeline and realized it didn't work. So someone proposed something that sounded almost absurd. Why not land the troops directly on the river, right next to the bridges? 12 HE-59s were modified to carry about 10 soldiers each, loaded with inflatable rubber dinghies, and assigned 90 men from the 16th Air Landing Regiment. They took off from a lake in northwest Germany and flew toward Rotterdam in the pre-dawn dark. Around 4:50 in the morning, they came in over the city with engines throttled back and touched down on the Nieuwe Maas. The dinghies went over the sides. The soldiers paddled toward both banks. What they found ashore was almost surreal. Rotterdam hadn't woken up yet. Civilians were starting their morning commutes. Some of them stood on the embankment and stared at the soldiers climbing out of the river, completely confused, not alarmed, and a few actually reached down and helped them up. They genuinely thought it was a military exercise. Trams were commandeered. The city hadn't understood yet that war had arrived inside it. The Germans secured both ends of the Wilhelmsbruck Bridge and held it for hours until paratroopers fought through from the south to link up. The bridge fell. Rotterdam fell. But what had happened on that river at dawn was something separate and remarkable. 12 float planes designed in 1930, declared obsolete for years, had just delivered a strike force into the heart of a major European city by landing on the river running through it. No other aircraft in the German arsenal could have done that. No other aircraft was even asked. After Rotterdam and Norway and the mine campaigns, the HE-59 entered its strangest chapter yet, and it began with a coat of white paint. Summer 1940. The Battle of Britain was starting. German aircrew were going into the Channel in large numbers, and the Luftwaffe had prepared for exactly this. A dedicated rescue service called the Seenotdienst was operating roughly 30 HE-5019C, painted entirely white, marked with large Red Cross insignia on the fuselage, wings, and tail. Under the Geneva Convention, those markings meant protection, flying ambulances, untouchable. For a short while, it worked. German records show that in just August and September 1940, these white HE-59s recovered 73 downed Luftwaffe pilots from the Channel. 73 men who would otherwise have drowned or been captured, but the British were watching closely. And what they saw raised serious suspicions. White HE-59s were being spotted making slow passes over British convoys, the kind of routes useful for radioing ship positions to incoming German bomber formations. Several were caught laying mines in the Thames estuary. Reports, unconfirmed but persistent, suggested the aircraft were being used to land German agents on the English coast under cover of the Red Cross. As early as July 1, 1940, RAF pilots had already forced a white HE-59 down near a British convoy. Weeks before any official policy existed, on July 13th, Winston Churchill personally issued the order. From July 20th onward, all Seenotdienst aircraft were to be shot down, Red Cross markings or not. The order came with a quiet additional instruction to RAF squadrons: keep it discreet. The British public, it was noted, might not fully understand shooting down aircraft with a Red Cross on the side. The Luftwaffe absorbed the new reality and adapted. The markings came off. The white paint came off. The HE-59 went back to military colors and kept flying rescue missions under constant threat. Slow, unarmed biplanes in the middle of the most violent air battle in history. They kept going up anyway. Here is the number that says everything. In 1943, 4 years into the war, 5 years after the HE-59 was officially declared obsolete, at least 18 separate Luftwaffe units were still flying various versions of it. Not as a stopgap, not because nothing better existed. 18 distinct operational formations, using the HE-59 for mine-laying, coastal reconnaissance, long-range reconnaissance, troop transport, air-sea rescue, navigation training, torpedo training, electronic warfare, and psychological warfare operations. The same basic airframe from 1930 had been converted into at least half a dozen distinct variants: dedicated rescue aircraft, navigation trainers, torpedo trainers, photographic reconnaissance platforms. Even Finland rented 4 from Germany in August 1943 for long-range recon behind Soviet lines over the Baltic, not bought, rented, and returned them 4 months later. By that point, no country in the world wanted to own a HE-59 anymore. But Finland still wanted to borrow 4 of them, because for one specific job in one specific corner of the war, the old big shoe was still the right tool. Not a single complete HE-59 survived the war. No museum has one. What's left is a handful of photographs and the paper trail of everything this forgotten biplane quietly did. A damage record that was never supposed to be possible for an aircraft that was perpetually, officially, finished. There's a kind of military equipment that wins wars by being extraordinary. Faster than everything, more powerful than everything, the weapon that reshapes the battlefield. The HE-59 was not that. It was slow enough that any decent fighter pilot could catch it without trying. Vulnerable enough that Churchill felt comfortable ordering it shot down under a Red Cross. Its engines were underpowered. Its armament was barely adequate. By every conventional measure, it should have been a footnote, a brief transitional aircraft that appeared for a moment and quietly vanished. But the men who flew it kept ordering more. They flew it into Spanish harbors in the dark, into Norwegian fjords to deliver soldiers and bring out the wounded, onto a river running through a city of 1 million people to seize a bridge that decided the fate of an entire campaign, into the middle of the Battle of Britain to pull their comrades out of the Channel. And every time someone in an office somewhere decided it was finally done, the men who actually used it said otherwise. The HE-59 was cheap enough to keep building, stable enough to fly in almost any conditions, simple enough to maintain far from home, and versatile enough that whenever something unusual needed doing, something that didn't fit neatly into the job description of any other aircraft, someone always looked at the big shoe and said, "What about that one?" The Spaniards meant it as an insult, but a good shoe goes everywhere. It outlasts everything. You keep wearing it long after you should have replaced it because it still fits, it still works, and nothing you've found since has been quite as reliable. The HE-59 flew from 1931 to 1944. It flew over Spain, Poland, Norway, France, England, the Baltic, the Thames Estuary, and Soviet-held territory. It carried bombs, torpedoes, mines, troops, wounded soldiers, rescue gear, cameras, and radio operators. It wore the markings of the Luftwaffe, the Condor Legion, the Finnish Air Force, and the Red Cross. It was declared obsolete before the war even started, and it was still flying when the aircraft meant to replace it had already come and gone. The most dangerous thing in war is never the most impressive thing in the room. It's the thing that keeps showing up.